Welcome to the Fit Affiliate podcast, where we talk about behavior and behavior-based conversations as they relate to CrossFit affiliate owners and coaches. My name's Lisa Hetherington, and I'm your co-host. Sitting alongside me are Tony and Chuck, the founders of Fit Affiliate.
And welcome back to our next episode of the Fit Affiliate podcast. In the hot seat with me again today is Tony. How are you, good sir?
Well, my seat's not very hot. It is uncomfortable because it's still a bike seat, but I'm happy to be here as always. Although Lisa doesn't really give me a choice because she just steals my calendar and tells me where I have to be. So I'm still happy to be here though, Lisa. Don't worry.
That's good. And I'm happy to be here as well.
At least until you tell me what the topic is, because if you tell me the topic, I might not be happy to be here.
Well, I thought this week, we had some just conversations back and forth because, spoiler alert, we talk outside of here, and I use that for ideas of things that you may wish to talk about on the podcast. And with it being the open week, one of the things you brought up with me is about talking about what CrossFitters have forgotten about fitness. And I think this ties in neatly to the Fit Affiliate Instagram post that actually went out today about, if you wanted to get better at fitness, are you going to hire Fraser or Glassman? So I think that's actually a really good little loop into that as well, which is, been kind of fun to have a look at the responses on Instagram.
Well, I didn't make that post because I wanted to become a podcast. However, I did know that if I posted that today, you were going to be like, we should talk about that. And I was like, I hope she doesn't say that. But I already knew what was going to happen. But I do think it's worth talking about, cryptically as it may sound, what CrossFitters have forgotten about CrossFit. Because I do think there's some often overlooked elegance that I think would be well served to be reminded of. And I also think that just the sheer impact and value of what it is that we do on a day-to-day basis that we take for granted and how you can serve that for more value and more dollars, I think is definitely probably worth talking about. But just so we're clear, I don't have a dog in the fight over Fraser and Glassman. I was just genuinely curious what people were going to say when it came time to choosing, their super coach or their super mentor. I had an inkling and a suspicion as to what the answer would be. But I mean, I'm hiring Glassman, but I'm also a loyalist. So there's that part of it.
Well, I figure that if you want to go to the source, not somebody else who's just followed the plan.
Well, right. I mean, I guess here we go. First of all,
we're in.
Is the open week, is that like Christmas for CrossFitters? Is that like a thing? Like we all get very excited about that?
Apparently we do get excited by it, and then we get really cranky about it, and
4 weeks
they're nervous about it,
and hurt feelings and invalidated scores and deadlines that people seem to become forgetful of. And oh God, the printer's out of ink again. And no, I will not come in on Sunday for your do-over. And has anybody seen my pen? That sounds like the open.
And complaining about the skills that you didn't have last year and you still don't have this year because you're only motivated for a week to get them. Yeah.
It is probably one of the greater times of the year, though, I think, because in regards to this conversation, what's cool about it is absent of pursuing the test of fitness that it's supposed to be. I mean, the thing that I think is really cool about the open is that it's the one time out of the year when everybody becomes a part of the same thing, which is really very cool. It's also a little bit problematic as it applies to the affiliate owners if you don't understand what's actually happening. It's one of the reasons that we've talked a lot about, made a few posts about understanding the reward mechanism of all humans and how you can tap into that, and really why it's so important that your mission and your vision is so vital. Because if you don't give them a why, then what's become whys, and the next thing you know, they're tapped into CrossFit's why, and that's not really what this was ever supposed to be about. And now everybody's hyper focused on, I want to do the sport of fitness, even though apparently, according to the comments today, everybody realizes that there's a difference between fitness and competition. Ironic, because that shouldn't be the case. But anyway, I'm ranting now at this point. So where do you want to start, homie? The beginning?
Yeah, let's start at the beginning. Let's what was the initial, I guess, thought bubble that prompted that comment that you'd made to me about, what CrossFitters have forgotten about CrossFit and how it all kind of just gets lost into this big either of opinions, I guess.
Well, when you give like literally 2 decades of your life to something, everything seems to get passed through the filter of CrossFit. So generally, a lot of the bubbles I send you, as you call them, are usually through musings. Because in case you're listening to this, it's all I think about all day long, even when I'm sleeping. So not things to send to Lisa, but really just being able to step back from it. One of the cooler things about my personal journey as it applies to CrossFit, through pretty much every single medium that you could possibly do, from, CrossFitter to pseudo wannabe competitor to affiliate owner to seminar instructor to, now sitting on this side of the screen with people and having larger level conversations, is that like that sort of ascension creates and provokes an awareness that I don't think is present in many people who are, in the shit, so to speak, when you're in the day-to-day things. Because I know what it's like to sit inside the affiliate and be consumed with, all the things that matter and not really able to step back from it. And that was one of the reasons that really provoked me to do this, because I get to, from where I sit, I get to have lots of bigger picture conversations with lots of affiliate owners and coaches about, the theoretical application of CrossFit and sort of the philosophical approach and pursuit to what these type of things and principles and procedures mean. And really, the value proposition that is all things CrossFit, but it all centers around your ability to think about CrossFit. And that sounds like very weird and culty. I know. But what I mean by that is to really understand the implication and the elegance that is what it means to be a CrossFitter and deliver CrossFit and teach CrossFit and coach CrossFit, because it's much larger than a workout. And I think that as time goes on, especially as we enter into weeks like this, it's really easy to get caught up into, the actual specificity, the thing, as opposed to the larger thing, meaning, worrying about the workout as opposed to the application of the workout. And that was really one of the reasons that kind of stirred this one. But really the main reason that I sent you that blurb was that due to the chaos, due to the overwhelm that exists in the majority of CrossFit affiliates, I feel like everybody has forgotten just how good they have it, because they forgot what it was like to not have it. And that's what stemmed this conversation. Not so much the Fraser Glassman post, but so much this one is about, like, do you even remember and understand what it is that you actually are doing? And now that everybody's all fired up over virtuosity and all these things, and in applying it to their affiliate, I think it's an important time to have the conversation.
Yeah, and we recently did an episode on the $1 Million Coach podcast about, like, we often hear as people gather the pitchforks and the torches that, CrossFit doesn't do enough for me. And we looked back about exactly the opportunities CrossFit has provided, both for your everyday person who wants to improve their life, but also creating a whole ecosystem of entrepreneurs, coaches that can actually make an income from helping people, rather than just, doing a generic program at the gym for somebody. It's a space that a lot of people, would never have opened their own business and created that. So that was a conversation we did a deep dive into last week, which, hit home across the board as a reminder of, we actually don't have it so bad. And it is hard when you've come into CrossFit later to, like, there are some people who are born and all they've ever known is a world with CrossFit, not like
That's fucking crazy to think about.
It is. And when people are sitting there, though, talking about, people like yourself and other OGs talking terms of CrossFit of even pre-box. So this was, before the games and
good old
things
days.
sort of, things really kicked off, and how things were. And like, just the change in, what would Katie and Bill Heiniger be doing without CrossFit? Would they have ever started a fitness equipment company that is, amazing, huge, life-changing for thousands of people that they have with them there.
And knowing Bill and Katie well, I know that whatever they would have been doing, they would have been doing it really well. I don't think that they probably would have been in the Matt Black empire that they're in now. But I do know one thing: anything those two touch, it probably would have been all right. I think there's a lot of parts to this conversation, and as listeners, I know you guys want me to spew contrarian things because that gets you excited. But I think a lot of it comes down to like the analogy of like being born rich, right? We all know, we have the suspicion as to what it would be like to have been born rich versus become rich versus, be a have-not. And so the people who, manage that life transition and they go from having nothing to now having something and then being able to, be in abundance and give away that something, they have a very different life, perspective than both the have-nots who chose to be quote unquote the victim. That's unfortunate and insensitive, but it's the truth. And then the other side of it, which is the haves, who were just born into it and they're just like, it's like, I don't remember where I saw this, but like they asked a bunch of wealthy people, wealthy kids, like what they think the average like American income is. And they were like 180,000 or something. I was like, well, you're only about 150 grand off. So there's a disconnection in reality based on what your upbringing has been. Right. And so to your point, as weird as it might be, like, yeah, there is an entire generation of people who, they literally weren't, they're younger than CrossFit is, which is wild to me to think about. But not really so much in an actual literal sense, but there's a lot of people professionally that are younger than CrossFit is. And so they don't really understand just how well they have it. And the thing that truly actually spurred this for me was they live in a time when the definition of fitness is abundant, meaning constantly varied functional movement performed at high intensity. First and foremost, that phrase didn't exist pre-CrossFit, but the most important one is increased work capacity across broad times and modal domains, which has been the guiding principle for all things that we have pursued collectively as a community and individuals as well. That didn't exist, right? And I think it's lost on people until you step out of the community that we live, eat, and breathe in and understand that people don't really know what fitness is. And we know it beyond a shadow of a doubt. Like there is no doubt in our mind what is fitness. And there's an entire generation of people who were born post definition of fitness. And then there's an entire generation of people who were pre definition of fitness. And I, unfortunately, despite making myself seem old, come from that second generation. Like I'm pre definition of fitness. And I remember the impact of the elegance of that statement in that you could take this overreaching sort of principle, this thing that like we all know fitness touches every single area of so many different things. And like Greg was able to sit, with the silence necessary to boil that down to such a definitive, quantitative and objective statement that everybody was just like, yeah, that's yes. Right. And where this came from really for me, this epiphany or this reminder, I should say, not so much an epiphany, was having listened to a podcast of two people that I respect very, very much, one of which I know personally, another one who has become very, very famous recently. And I'm not going to say their names because I'm not going to call them on the carpet on this one. But and listening to those two, and they are incredibly well-respected people in multiple different communities, one of which is probably one of the most regarded and respected exercise scientists that exists. Hearing him when asked by the other presenter, how do you define fitness basically? And listening to his response, which was a great response, but it was so big and so massive and so encompassing over these 12 criteria and all these things that I was like, there's no human you'll come in contact with who's going to remember any of that, nor are they going to understand the impact of improving something so simple. And so that kind of spurred that blurb that I had sent to you, because I was like, the post definition of fitness era doesn't understand how easy it is now to sit down and be like, here's what we're going to do, Lisa. We're going to increase your work capacity across broad times and modal domains. That's going to be your fitness. And that simplicity is uniquely afforded to you through the definition and the development of CrossFit, right? And there's so much power in that. And there's so much value in that. I think because we live it and breathe it and we're consumed by it, we forget that other people don't do that. Like, just go to the supermarket and grab one of the magazines, right? Like, they will give you all sorts of different mimetic sort of pursuits of fitness. I like have this body or that body or this or that, or like people's ability to define fitness. Greg knew, if I can't define this thing and I can't, measure this thing and I can't improve this thing, I have nothing. This whole thing doesn't work. And so, we get boiled down a lot into this, this exercise cult, right? All CrossFitters are CrossFit, but like the tie that binds us that I don't think Greg gets a lot of credit for, as much as he should at least, is that he built a thing that was identifiable, observable, repeatable, and improvable because it was quantitative and it was objective in a world that is the poster child of subjectivity. Like, everybody has no idea what they're actually after. They're just after something. And so that was really what we sought to do when we built Fit Affiliate, was that, we really understood the gravity and the immensity that happened in the affiliate model, but we understood it because it was just so simple and so elegant. But I think that's the part that gets lost on people, because it is so simple. It is so elegant. Like, Greg was so good at what he was saying that oftentimes people just get lost in the poetry of it. They just don't even realize, like, step back, rethink it, because what he just did was shattered an entire paradigm of an entire industry by being able to succinctly define what is fitness, because that didn't exist. And I think that, like, that is a sort of a dogmatic, preaching session on my behalf, but it's very important, especially as we move into this season of competitive CrossFit, is that, like, we all exist for one purpose, and that is to increase work capacity across broad times modal domains, aka fitness. And I think that part is lost on us. Like, the EC podcast was a great episode that we did on here, in which she basically summed it up. Everything that we do is in pursuit of one thing, and that is, does it improve fitness? And if it doesn't, we don't do it.
Yep. Yeah. Nothing's excluded until it is proven that it doesn't help in that end goal, and then it's like, okay, that's excluded. Like, people will say that, CrossFit, they don't do curls or isolation. Well, we do, but only the things that serve in that ultimate pursuit and support our other activities, rather than just being for the sake of it. Like,
and then to what order of magnitude, right? To what end, right? Because, like, a lot of things can improve fitness, but if it doesn't improve it to an order of magnitude, the lesser is the more valuable thing to do. And that is a piece that is also ultimately lost on so many people. And, like, so the conversation today in the social medias was about the, Glassman and Fraser, who would you hire? And, like, that is a conversation of magnitude, right? Like, the general belief, I believe, for most people is that because, Matt has experienced more success than anybody, and he's trained and he's developed and he's pursued more and he's endured more, he'd be the better person to go for. But objectively speaking, if we're measuring fitness and the improvement of fitness, which one of those two is going to be the most effective at improving your actual fitness, identifiably, observably, quantifiably? Right? One is probably going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at you in the attempt to be able to help you endure as many things as you can see. Another one is likely going to step back and ask you, what is it that you actually need to see to be prepared? And I think that there's a lot of value in that, just relearning, rethinking it, and reconsidering it.
And that's where, we can fall into the conversation loops as affiliate owners, where, members come to you and they want more. I want more. Like, this is what works for, Matt Fraser or, Rich Froning or whoever it happens to be. It's like, I need to do more of that. It's like, like, what's your, sure, if you want to have, it's interesting seeing the long tail now of, like, the athletes that have done the sport for a very long time. Like, Rich, who's had some knee and hip and shoulder things, and Josh Bridges, Dan Bailey. Like, there's things that pop up now after doing such high volume over such a sustained period. Like, if that's what you want, to have a really short sort of burning moment in this, okay, but how is that helping your overall life? Like, how is that going to make you better in 10 years or 15 years?
Well, I think in all fairness, I mean, first and foremost, I'm not anti-CrossFit games. I think they're fascinating.
No. Yeah, I think they're great.
But
I love it.
you know, we also once played football, the American version of football, with leather helmets, and thought that that was absolutely fine, right? And so, you know, the sport itself is so new, it's so novel, it's so immature that, you know, I think you will see lots of people come into the sport with very, very, very different approaches, you know, over the years. In that, I think that the way that we'll test fitness will change substantially. I think that the way that, you know, or the way we measure it will change substantially as well. I think that the way that people will pursue it will change substantially. I think that just the longevity conversation will become more prevalent, and I think that the objective goal of the two are at this point appear to be, to the community, based on, you know, lots of different times I've questioned them, they seem to think they're mutually exclusive, right? Like there's competitive CrossFit, and then there's actual CrossFit, and those two things seem to live on these two different islands. But like, that's not the case, right? Like, fitness is fitness. And if we believe in the universal definition of fitness, which is, like we've said, work capacity, like those aren't mutually exclusive. And maybe potentially the people are getting lost in the complexity and the severity and the intensity of the tests, and that they think that, like, oh, you know, fitness, in order to test fitness truly, like we have to like damn near kill people. That's not the case, right? Like, you know, the thing that is being programmed every single year is not about like how close can we get these people to death. It is how much can we expose them to leave no shadow of any doubt, no stone unturned in terms of testing their actual fitness. Because what we've got is a few hundred people that we have to definitively, clearly know that, like, the one that comes out of this is undeniably the more prepared, the more capable. And it's nothing to do with the volume or the intensity or the duration or the near-death experience so much as it's like, we're trying to find work capacity across broad times and modal domains. Broad times, modal domains. You have to kind of throw everything in the kitchen sink at them in this singular event. But like that, there's nothing about that considers fitness as it applies to life in that environment or that element.
Yeah, and it's,
go ahead.
We often joke about, you know, if we, you know, when I've been to watching the games or something, you know, we joke about watching people exercise faster. And essentially, you know, what they're doing is a workout. It's, and in affiliates, you know, we talk to our members about the open. Let's use that for an example. It's just another workout. It's just a workout. Everyone's just doing a workout. It's not, you know, you know, it's not any different from any other workout you would do, except the stories we tell ourselves around it and the impact it has on us that we then tell ourselves around it and create.
The generations of competitive CrossFit, or what we thought was competitive CrossFit, are fascinating. Like, I think we've now reached an age in an era of, you know, where things are a little bit clearer, more concise, safer. I think it's so many videos of like so many competitions and so many unfortunate things that came out of it that were just truly unnecessary. You know, in attempts in confusion, really, in that, like, you know, unless it was going to kill somebody, it wasn't a good test of fitness. And like, I think we now live in an era where, and I think that this era is going to continue to evolve in that, like, it's never been about how hard it was. It was really just about how hard they were willing to do the thing. And I think there's a big difference there. But I want to go back to the one thing that you did say, which was basically as it applies to like the affiliate owners and why people in the gym end up doing, you know, wanting more and more and more. And really where that comes from, right? And that is that because of the simplicity of CrossFit and because of the abundance of it and the constant exposure that we all have, I think that the tool of CrossFit as itself, is we apply it as coaches and trainers, becomes more about the thing and less about testing the thing. Because remember, the point of CrossFit is testing fitness. I don't think, and this is me just throwing this out there, but I've got a little bit of experience, but there's not a lot of measuring, and there's not a lot of testing, and there's not a lot of quantification that's actually happening in affiliates. There's actually a lot of sort of can kicking down the road where they believe that like CrossFit's taking care of all of this for me, right? They're programming the workouts or the different, we repurpose them and we use them when they're convenient for us based on the number of equipment that we have. But like, then the clients, they put their score on the board or they put it in their book and then like, c'est la vie, and then we move on to the next thing. But like, are you doing anything with that data? And I can tell you with certainty that the answer is no. The vast majority of people, even the people themselves, are like, well, I mean, I look at my scores and make sure that they're going up, but I'm like, this also applies to things that you pursue in an attempt to make those scores go up or down. I guess in this case, time wants to go down, right? It's like, and I think if affiliate owners understood better that your job as an affiliate owner is to regularly measure and assess and evaluate and quantify the actual improvement of your client's fitness, you'd find that a lot of them would probably not be pursuing more things because it'd be very clear that like, hey, listen, so based on the numbers, you spent 18 hours last week on the rower, 17 hours lifting, and 42 hours doing gymnastics. Your benchmarks across these key domains, modal domains, seems to have increased about 3%. So let's try to change the stimulus a little bit and see if we can actually improve that 3%. And you probably would find as a coach really quickly that if I just stripped you of all the task-urbation that you want to do, right, and no longer doing all these intervals to hide all of your insecurities and the fact that you hate yourself, and forced you to just focus on a singular effort with a little bit of skill work, perform 3 to 5 times a week with appropriate rest days in there, you would probably likely find that number either A, maybe went up a little bit. Let's say you improved your benchmarks maybe 4%, or maybe only 2%. But there's the caveat. Even if it went down 1%, if we removed 100% of the extra things that you were doing, therefore your net profit, so to speak, in your fitness just improved, right? Because I just now gave you back 72 hours of intervals and everything else that you're doing in a net decrease in fitness of 1%. And there's power in that, but that means that you're going to do something with the numbers, and you need to know it. And a lot of people don't really know what to do with the numbers, except for like, hey, you're getting better, you're not getting better. And I think that's a big part of the conversation.
And I think that, like, part of me and my, like, spoiler alert, in a nerd, I used to keep, when I was in the affiliate, spreadsheets of the programming and the results, and doing an analysis of the programming, even similar to what they teach in the L2, but making sure that there was a balance of things, and looking at it and going, wow, this week really didn't get the results, or I'd put together a program, they're going, oh, well, nobody PB'd at the end of this little retest cycle. And we used to retest things regularly. But I think because we get in the mentality of like, now where people are like, I don't want to repeat the same workout twice unless it's like a benchmark girl. Like, affiliate owners would have, 3, 5, 7, 10, 12 years of programming. And they've probably never revisited any of that stuff because they don't know which bits worked. It was like, this is just the style that I'm following at the time.
Man, there's a lot of things in there that you just touched on that I want to tear apart all of them. Data, like most things, is kind of like your air squat. You can never do too much with it, right? In theory, right? You can constantly always be improving your air squat, but much the same as your air squat. To what end? To what order of magnitude, right? Because like we already know that weirdo in the gym who's barefoot all the time and is constantly in squat therapy and is foam rolling literally everything all day, at some point, the investment and the return on investment they're at odds with each other, right? And so you can never be too good at air squatting, but you can, in theory, work on it too much to the point where like the gains are marginal. And the same thing can be said with data. I'm not telling you guys that you need to become numbers obsessed, fitness accountants, so to speak, because that's not really what it's about. What I'm saying is, are you doing something with the data? are you actually measuring, and are you making them aware of the data? Because I think a lot of the problems that exist in CrossFit and affiliates, not CrossFit, but in affiliates, would be circumnavigated if they just understood what Greg did on Research Drive. Right? Like, these workouts that we all take for granted and we know as dogma, and like, they're essentially like Psalms for us. Like they're literally Bible passages. These things existed because they were Greg's attempt to test fitness, right? Like, they weren't just workouts. They were, most of them were just exercise. Most of them were just workouts, but like there was a handful of them that he knew that like this combination of movements performed semi-regularly would demonstrate lots of key weaknesses that I could objectively, as the coach, know that my client, despite subjective feelings, is objectively improving on, right? And yes, no doubt about that, that gets much harder at scale. Way harder. It's another reason why your prices got to go up. I mean, you can't have 300 members and do that unless you find a way to build 15 or 20 of you as a coach who's going to care that much, which is possible and it can be done. But I think that we need to understand, what it is that we're testing for and how we test. I don't want you guys keeping like massive fucking stacks of workout logs, right? You can objectively just go out and look at the whiteboard and keep track of each day. How many people came today? What is the percentage of people who are attending? What type of things are they attending? What type of things are they avoiding? I'm going to control for that. On days that matter, what is the percentage of people who did report a PR? What is the percentage of people who didn't report a PR? Of those people who reported a PR, how much of a PR? And in what part of their journey are they in, right? Because we already know that people in the beginning of their journey, like they look at a barbell and PR, right? Like those of us who are 3 to 5 years in, it goes down. But the thing that really ultimately matters is that at its core, where this becomes very problematic, is that it always works, right? And so I think most affiliates and most coaches, they do look at the data quite a bit and like, it's just always working, but how well, right? And that's the part that needs to be evaluated and considered. And this is really where the center of this conversation came from, which is like CrossFit has made it so easy for us that like we have forgotten, like if you lived outside of this space and you lived outside of what CrossFit put together is their training program and their coach development program, and you had to figure this stuff out on your own, like, and you tried to program these workouts and come up with these things and identify these things and test for these things and explain these things and communicate these things and like understand, your people in your gym just know it, right? If you said to somebody, I want you to snatch, run 400 meters and then do as many pull-ups as you can, and then we're going to repeat that 5 times until your percentages fall off. Any other gym on the planet would be like, first and foremost, I can't do a pull-up. Second of all, what the hell did you say about my snatch? And what's 400 meters? Right? Like these are all things that like a CrossFitter would be like, that's gonna suck. I'm in. Right? Like, and that's a very cool thing. But again, there's probably gonna go well, and it's always gonna get better. And here's where people get lost in it, because it's always working until either A, it doesn't work because injuries happen or something like that happens. But like, it will always be improving, but it's your job as a coach, your job as the person who's administering this stimulus in measuring this quantification, is to measure how effective, right? Because it'll always be most effective minimum dose. Like your goal is to not give them as much as they can. It's how little can I give them for the most amount of return, not the opposite. And that's what I think gets lost on a lot of people, because we do get caught up every day in the what's, and we get overwhelmed and like, well, if one workout is good, then like 2 surely must be better, right? Like, if A plus B equals C, then D, E, and F has got to be even better, right? And then we end up doing that, and things don't really get that much better, right? We do 3 times the stuff, and we get 1.5 times the return. Like, well, it seems to me like if you were tracking the metrics, you would probably just get rid of doing 3 times the stuff and go back to like 1 times the return and be like, that's actually much better. Because if we're thinking about this in terms of like investing, you'd be absolutely foolish to keep dumping money into something to yield, 15% when you could put in way less money, in fact, no money, and get back 5%. You'd be like, well, one of those is a much more passive route to income and wealth. Because like, think about what you get to do with all that time, energy, and money that you would have otherwise been wasting. But that was really the point in this, right? Because like, all of us inevitably end up arriving back to this point where you can't really understand it until you experience it. And that is, when it comes time to really truly measure the investment and the return, or the risk versus the reward, whatever you want to call it, there's definitely a life cycle of a CrossFit, right? We've talked about this enough on here before, where eventually you all end up back here where like my old ass is, where it's just like, I do 20 to 30 minutes of workout a day, and then I go outside and play. I ride my bike, I ski, I do, long form endurance type things. And like, I don't train for any of those things. I don't train for a single stitch of any of those, but I fall down regularly and I get back up. I can keep moving well longer than anybody else that's in my age group that's not a CrossFitter. And like, I can do that without doing multiple. Like a 50K race is going to suck no matter what, but like, I just keep moving, right? Because fitness works.
Yeah.
And so you realize that at the end of the day, it's always been about minimum effective dose. And that's really what I wanted to talk about with this whole thing. And it's kind of like a rant, but it's so simple and it's so elegant and it works so well that we forgot the one thing that matters. And that is the definition of fitness. Does it increase work capacity across broad times modal domains? Good. To what end? Great. If not, stop doing it. But if it's not necessarily, if the investment, if the juice is not worth the squeeze, back it back down.
Yep. But I think, and we've talked about this on this podcast before, about how as humans, we like to overcomplicate things. So, we talk about how running a CrossFit affiliate should be simple. It should be boring. It should be easy. But then we go, that doesn't feel right. So we start tinkering and changing and adjusting and overcomplicating, because that's just part of our human condition. And then suddenly, like our workouts, we're doing way more than we need to be doing and creating problems instead of solving them. And it's like, well, is this a problem or are you making it one? Which is one of our core tenets, I guess. But we just get caught up in that loop of like, it must have to be hard for it to be effective. If I'm not suffering, it's not working.
This is a life rule, so write it down, put it wherever it is. The more I try to fix it, the more complicated I'll make it. That's it. And process that as you will, but I guarantee you, anybody who just heard me say that can step back and be like, fuck, so true, right? Like, and it is the case of how this all works. And that is essentially the curse of the novice. You think back on your journey as a trainer and as a coach, and just how complicated you tried to make things, and realizing that they could have just been so simple all along. You could have just let them be. But as it applies to what matters in the affiliate, is that, you have to get back to what matters so that people understand what it is that matters. Otherwise, the absence of why is what's become wise. And like that natural pursuit of more and more and more is only a byproduct of the absence of why. Right? If people are constantly reminded of their why, like, Lisa, you're here for this, and this is what you came in for. Like, what are you doing on the rower? Like, if people are constantly reminded of those whys, it's very different. Like, I'm not really entirely sure why you doing 4 workouts a day is helping you be able to play with your grandkids. Like, wouldn't it be better just spending that time at home with them, or going to see them, than being in here? And I'm not trying to take away anybody's time. There's a very different reason why most people spend time in the gym, but I think it's important that everybody understands that you are addicted to exercise. Just so we're clear. Like, you can paint it however you want to paint it, but the reason that you're here is you're hiding from something else. And I'm here for it. I'm glad you have this space, and I'm glad that, we've carved it out, and there's much worse things you could do. So rock on, do what you got to do. But let's be honest with yourself, right? Like, because the math doesn't add up. The amount of time you're spending and the return do not align. And that's okay. But that's your job as affiliate owners and coaches, is to have that conversation, because I can assure you that you could be, if you need to make more money, and most of them do, and you need to have more people who care more about your product, and most of them do, and you need people who are more subordinate to the mission, the vision, and the statement, employees and clients alike, you need to do a better job of understanding what it is that you actually are in the business of. And you don't sell CrossFit, you use it. But you need to understand what it is that you do. I'm going to use CrossFit to solve all of your problems because it works. It will work every fucking time, 100%. That doesn't matter. They don't need to know that. That's just my tools in my toolbox, and I will deploy them as needed, as much as needed, to achieve the success that you are after. And then we will revisit and we'll reestablish new things for you to go after. Because I assure you, once you learn how to play with your grandkids, and that's pain-free, you're going to come to me and be like, so I'm thinking I want to try skiing again, right? I'm like, now we're fucking talking, right? Like, you know, and the goalposts will move in a good way. And I think that that's the thing that needs to happen. But people don't come to you, or they may come to you. A lot of people will come to you and be like, I'd like to give you $100 a month to do unlimited classes here for you to leave me the fuck alone. And that's it. And then when it comes time for you to raise the rates, they're like, I can't raise rates. I'm like, well, you're not doing anything for them, right? They've bought CrossFit. You're just a reseller now, right? Like that's a problem, right? And like most affiliates find themselves in an unfortunate situation in that they are essentially a reseller instead of a provider. And there's a very different existence in that. What I mean by reseller is that you are taking a product from somebody and then redistributing it and reselling it for your profit to somebody else, which is a great strategy in a lot of business. And that's fine. And you can do that. But understand that like there's very slim margins in reselling because it's a volume game. You must do it a lot over and over and over again. And you must have a really good source of lead generation in marketing, et cetera, to get those people in at the abundance and the quality you need to get in. Or you can take something and you can use it as a tool and you can deploy it. And there's a very there's a very big difference in how that applies. And so there's resellers and then there's essentially providers. And you guys are providers. If you're listening to this and you care, you're not a reseller. You're a provider. And that means that you don't sell CrossFit, you use CrossFit. You provide CrossFit as a tool to solve people's problems.
Yep. And that's the powerful difference in thinking about it. I was just thinking as you were saying that about, you know, if you go to a mechanic and say, I need to get my car fixed, the mechanic's not going to take you through every tool they're going to use to do the job and, you know, sell you, you know, on that. They're just like, I just want my car fixed. Okay, I'm going to fix your car, but you're not going to talk about how they're going to do it. Whereas when, you know, people come into the gym, we do get stuck in that what's and we start talking about all the things we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And people are like, oh, I'm overwhelmed. That sounds scary. And I'm going to pay you $150 a month to be hot, uncomfortable, and sweaty every day. Like, okay, that doesn't seem fun. It's, you know, they just want their problems solved. They're coming to us as the experts.
Yeah. And like, I mean, if you go on Amazon, everybody on Amazon is a reseller, right? And so nobody's on there explaining to you, you know, how this thing is going. Everybody on there freely assumes that you know what it is that you're after. And you go looking for it and you type it into the Amazon bar and then you get there. And then every single one of those product listings will list out all of its features. What it's got, you know, what it's built out of, what kind of finish it is, blah, 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 all these things. And then you decide based on yours. And that's fine. But guess what else is on there? A million other people selling the same thing. And what do? I'm going to go whittle it down to what can I get as fast as I can get it? How cheap can I get it? Who's on Prime, et cetera. And then you make that decision. And that sounds a lot like what happens when someone decides, you know what? I need CrossFit. And so what do? They go CrossFit and shopping, right? And then they end up finding a whole bunch of resellers who will tell them all their features. And then they're like, thank you for telling me that. I'll be back. I'm going to go process this information. AK, I'm going to go call all the other resellers and I'm going to compare your features to their features, which are really going to be the same features, but it's only going to come down to who remembered to say more, right? Because like somebody threw in there, like, we have 3 showers. And you're like, I don't even know if that's a good thing, but like they said they have 3 showers. I don't even know if this gym has 3 showers, right? Like, and so people just start listing them and they're like, okay, which one was the cheapest? This podcast says, I'm done with this recording.
Yeah, my modem just my router just shut down completely.
That's usually me on Wednesdays. But when Lisa goes down as the host, then we've got a real big problem because I'm like, well, it's one thing if one of us goes down, but hello?
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of the podcast regardless. But what I was saying when I lost you is that most affiliates are resellers and most people wait for people to go CrossFit shopping. Right. And so when they do decide, much like Amazon, you go in and you go look for those things, you go shopping for it. And those resellers, they just spit out what it is. And so don't be surprised when people price shop you. But unlike Amazon, you could just solve people's problems, right? And so get to that point, get to where they need to be, because a very different reality when you become a provider as opposed to a reseller. You're going to use CrossFit and it's going to work every single time. But don't forget just how elegant a tool that it is. It's a lot like if you were given, the world's best set of tools and they were just given to you, you would probably be completely unaware of just how powerful that toolbox is and how many cars you could fix with that toolbox. Cause you're just like, I don't know, this is my toolbox. Like, and then somebody else who comes in who is used to like their own like shitty toolbox, be like, dude, you know how good that toolbox is, right? So keep that in mind. But I think it all comes down to remembering what it is that you do, what it is that you're in the business of, and where you're after. And as we move into like this sort of like the season of fitness, as it applies to everybody's going to get distracted with what's and the skills they chose to abandon all year long and the standards that are going to be the devil and all these things. Remember that this is also an opportunity for you to assess how effective you were as the person that they trusted. And that's going to be a very hard thing for most of you guys. And so we tend to want it to be somebody else's fault. But the good news is you can always improve it. But the best part about it is that you're a CrossFitter and you sell CrossFit and you do CrossFit and you use CrossFit. Just remember how great it is.
Yep.
It's worth a lot of money.
Perfect. Mic drop moment. Thank you, sir. Good chat. A little bit of a disruption at the end. Yeah, it'll be it'll come back to life. Looks like it's had a bit of CPR. It'll be okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. All right. I will talk to you on the next one.
Okay, goodbye.
Thank you, my friend, for listening to the Fit Affiliate podcast. If you would be interested in hopping on a free call with us to just kind of chat about what you think your problems are and what you think the gap is between where you're at and where you want to go, we can see if maybe we can help you along that journey, figure out if we're all a good fit to do some sweet things together. So click the link, set up a consult. Let's help you identify some problems that we can mutually solve.